Now is Rachel Maddow from The Rachel Maddow Show. Thank you for being here. What do you think we're learning from Khodorkovsky?
First of all, congratulations on getting this interview.
Thank you.
I have been, obviously the Khodorkovsky story, A, you can pronounce his name better than I can, but B, I've followed this story for a long time because the idea of Putin's grip on Russia is at its heart not just a sort of intrigue and drama story in terms of Putin's influence in our own election, it's also a tragedy in terms of the Russian people. I mean, Russia is a gigantic country. It has immense natural resources. It has a beautiful culture that has contributed so much to the world despite all of the political difficulties and the mass scale politically designed disasters of the modern history of Russia, right? From the Tsars on down, right? And then you get somebody like Khodorkovsky who doesn't get ahead because he killed and stole and connived his way there. I mean, yeah, Russian business after the fall of the Soviet Union is definitely a dark, dirty, and politicized thing. But Khodorkovsky is sort of a meritocratic success story. He builds this oil company. He ought to be succeeding. He ought to be a titan in his country. He's the richest man in that country, and Putin just snips him, just cuts him off. And I'm glad you played that historical footage in terms of him being in the cage, in the courtroom, in the plexiglass cube. It's a tragedy, and I have been very curious as to what he thinks about this new adventurism of Putin in terms of this influence that he's exerted in our own election. So first of all, I just think it's important, full stop. Second of all, I do think he made some news in what he told you about Sergei Gorkov. So one of the Trump administration, Trump transition, Trump campaign, Russian government contacts that was not disclosed until independent investigators found out about it was this meeting with Gorkov. For Khodorkovsky, what did he tell you? He said, I have no doubt he wouldn't do anything on his own behalf. He is a man who carries out orders. That's important news about that meeting. And there's still been no explanation as to what happened there and why Jared Kushner was meeting with him during the transition.
Right, and there's a total contradiction between them. So either the Russian bank is telling the truth or the Trump administration is telling the truth. But it was either a diplomatic meeting or a business meeting. Some more news on this we have from VTB Bank. Their response, they say these allegations from Khodorkovsky in this new interview are, quote, completely false, unfounded, and with no substance. Mr. Kostin, that's one of the Russian bankers tied to Putin, is not personally acquainted with Mr. Kushner, has never had discussions of any other kind or communication with Mr. Gorkov regarding a possible meeting with Mr. Kushner, and doesn't understand the point such a meeting could have had. Of course, many of these banks have been working for years. The point of these meetings is to at least lift sanctions. They're publicly looking for that.
Vladimir Putin personally appointed Sergei Gorkov to the job that he was in when he met with Jared Kushner. Sergei Gorkov went to KGB school. Like his grad school was their version, like it was FSB school by then, but it was KGB school. I mean, and this powerful testimony that you just got from the guy who previously employed him when Russia used to be allowed to have private oil companies before Putin took that for himself and his cronies too. Gorkov meeting with Kushner is not just a red flag, it is a blaring red siren. And the fact that it's not just contradictory explanations from the White House and the Russian side of this, there has been no plausible White House explanation for what Jared Kushner was doing in that meeting. Was it related to Kushner family business properties? Was it related to the Trump transition? Was it related to the Magnitsky Act? Was it related to sanctions? Was it related to the ongoing undisclosed conversations that Flynn was having with Russians at the same time? We've had no explanation of that whatsoever. Jared Kushner's MO in terms of dealing with the Russia investigation is to appear to be completely transparent and cooperative. His security clearance application was a complete disaster in terms of disclosing his foreign contacts. His answers about whether or not anybody from the Trump campaign at the transition had been in contact with Russian officials is a complete disaster in terms of what we later learned about those contacts that he didn't disclose. But this Gorkov meeting in particular, what was it about? The White House should have to say what it was about if Jared Kushner is going to continue to work at the White House.
And one of the other things Khodorkovsky talked to me about was how Vladimir Putin controls and stage manages so much in Russia. And these banks, as we've covered, are an arm of the state in a sense. Here he was talking about Putin in the 2018 forthcoming election, which, as you've covered on your show, has been rife with attacks on opponents just like Khodorkovsky. Take a look at this. Can Putin lose the next presidential election next year?
Если бы у нас в 2018
If there was to be an election in 2018 by some miracle, it is highly likely that Putin would lose.
проходили бы выборы, но в 2018 году нам
Instead, in 2018, we're going to see a show called Presidential
Его
Election.
нельзя выиграть.
It cannot be won because it is a show.
На шоу может произойти
The show will go exactly as the producer has planned.
We know something about that. It's scripted television is what they call it here. Reality shows.
А если что-нибудь произойдет,
And if something unexpected happens, you can always re-record.
And that's the story he lived.
Yeah. And, you know, Khodorkovsky, to his credit, you know, after going through this ordeal, after having being brought low from being the richest man in Russia, running the biggest oil company in Russia, being jailed, being humiliated, living through a decade in prison, and then being exiled, when he got out, what he decided to do was stay involved in Russian life, stay involved in trying to promote civic institutions and political opposition parties in Russia, which, as he talked to you about, is an incredibly dangerous thing for him to have done. But he's done it. He ends up being an important external force in terms of Russian civic life. So, I mean, the Alexei Navalny story, who's the man who's going to run against Putin in the presidential election, is itself dramatic and fascinating. And, you know, he's such a charismatic figure in the same way that Khodorkovsky is. You can see his wit even with the translation there in his interview with you. But it's the difference in Russia, the difference with Putin is that what's constantly looming over every point of conflict with Putin, anybody who's challenging, anybody who's rising to the point of being interesting in terms of opposing Putin, what constantly looms over that is your expectation that they will end up dead. And, you know, that's not America. That's not how we do things. And to be reminded in the person of Khodorkovsky or in Navalny right now or in any of these other people, Boris Nemtsov, any of the other people who have been killed, Anna Politkovskaya, to be reminded about what it means to take Putin's approach to world politics. For me, it makes it very serious. I'm interested in the drama and the intrigue and everything. It makes it very serious that Putin got this far into our own politics. It's not just a threat to us, it's a mortal threat to American politics to bring somebody this far into it who frequently and without any consequence kills his opponents.
Rachel Maddow, thank you for being here.
Congratulations on this scoop, man. I'm super jealous. Well done.
Thank you so much.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.